Bradley with both of them. I have two sisters and my mom that are much younger than me. My mom did Bradley with both of them, and they were home births. But they were home births, so it was sort of like the environment we grew up in, not like crazy hippie, we birth babies at home kind of people. But it wasn't like a totally foreign concept to me. Like the idea of having babies with no drugs was not this crazy thing. His mom was an assistant with a midwife. So it was kind of something he had heard of before. I know a lot of people grow up with like, how would you ever have a baby with no drugs? But we kind of knew something about it. So when we got pregnant with Bailey, it wasn't a done deal. We didn't know for sure that we wanted to do Bradley, but my mom really encouraged us to at least take the class to learn a little bit about, or a lot about what your body does, what labor is like. That kind of thing. So we decided, regardless of what we ended up doing for our birth, it would be a good idea to at least get some good information about having babies. So we went ahead, we did the class, and the actual birth story. I went into labor. I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning with some contractions. I wasn't totally sure what was going on, but after a little bit, got me like out of bed and couldn't sit down anymore. And so I woke Andrew up and said, "Hey, I think your baby wants to be born today." And so he woke up and kind of started working with me, and it was a little different than maybe what we had read about because it was hard work from the moment I woke up. I don't know if I slept through pre-labor or if I just didn't notice it, but I just woke up and it was hard work and we were going. I honestly don't have the best memory of that morning before we actually got to the hospital. I don't know if I was having a baby. Andrew actually remembers it a lot better, so he's going to give the details.
Right. Well, that's because you were in labor. You don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. Well, the first time we told the story, he actually said, "Were we at the same birth?"
Yeah. No, but like you said, when she woke me up, I guess she had like 45 minutes after you had woken up, and I, pulled out a piece of paper, pulled out my iPod or whatever to try to start timing the contractions, and they were all over the place. There wasn't anything consistent about it. Like she said, it was pretty hard work in the beginning. They were fairly intense, double peaking at times, and not quite what I expected. A little bit of a curveball with that, but what was so great about the class and the practice we had done, the time we had put in, was that even though it wasn't quite by the book, we still had a sense of, okay, that's okay. We can still work with this. We can still, go through with it. And that was really the story of when we had Bailey, that with a few curveballs, we were still able to keep going towards the goal that we wanted. So the contractions were a little bit all over the place, pretty intense, and then she had some vomiting, which was another sort of curveball that I hadn't expected. But even with that, like I said, it was still, we were able to stay calm, and we were able to work through the contractions as they did come. And oddly enough, through the whole time of labor, the contractions themselves were really not ever there was never an issue of the contractions were overwhelming you. We were always able to stay mentally focused, work through it together, and the pain wasn't too out of control, and you were right on the whole way through. So
I think it was doing the class. We knew what my body was doing. Like we understood what was going on. So even though it wasn't exactly like we had expected, we were still comfortable with we understood this is my body working. This is what's going on. So it wasn't scary. It was just, okay, how are we going to work with this? We need to get some more water. Somebody needs to eat some Cheerios. Like, what are we going to do?
Right. So we were probably at home for about 5-6 hours until about 9. She went to the bathroom. There was a little bit of blood, and so at that point I called the doctor. And while the doctor was on the line, she had a contraction. I basically gave the phone to her while she had her contraction, and the doctor listened to her reaction and said, "Why don't you go ahead and come in?" So we got in the car.
Well, one funny thing, I don't know if you've gotten to this point yet, but they talk about as you go through labor, at some point you get to the point where clothes are no longer an issue, you don't really care. And I was just wearing a shirt at the time, and Andrew's like, "Okay, we need to get dressed, we need to go," and I'm like, "I don't care, let's just go." It was June. I was like, whatever, I can be in my underwear, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But
so when we got to the hospital, maybe you have a better recollection of this. They took one look at her and took her straight in. No.
I had been thrown up for 5 or 6 hours, so I must have looked rather.
It showed. It showed that you were in labor. And,
So So they took me right in, and one thing my mom had made it clear she wanted to be there, and we had said absolutely not. We don't want anybody else there. My mom, we had called her to tell her we were going to the hospital. She beat us to the hospital and was in the room when we walked in, and we were both kind of like, this is not what we said. And she goes, I'm not here to stay. Just want to see if you need anything. I will go in the waiting room. And she kind of talked to us for a minute, and we were like, well, could you go get our luggage? And our bags. And she went out to the car, like we're on vacation. Went out to the car to go get our bag, and we both looked at each other, and we were like, she has to stay. She cannot leave. It was something about having somebody who'd been there before, just like the calm of having her there, 2 seconds in the room, and we were like, you have to stay. It ended up being the best decision we could make, and she actually was there for my second daughter being born too. But it was really nice, just as a side note, Andrew could like go out every, half an hour or so.
Just always be there.
And get a drink. Like, it was just nice to have somebody to kind of give a break. And she had done it before, and so when things got a little crazy sometimes, looking over at her and seeing her be calm kept us calm. We were like, okay, if mom's not freaking out, then we're probably okay. So it was just nice to have her there. But anyway, so our first real kind of test of Bradley came when we got checked into the hospital, and I was really dehydrated from having been throwing up one morning. And they came and they said, we think you need some IV fluids, which, of course, you don't want to get hooked up to monitors. You don't want to have all this stuff. But we kind of talked about it, and I'm not sure I could have made it the 6 more hours that we needed to go without some fluids. I mean, I'd been thrown up a lot, and I couldn't keep anything down. And so we kind of took what we knew from Bradley, the goal that we wanted, and we made the decision that IV was a good idea. And in the IV, they threw in an anti-nausea, which was heaven on earth. And so I stopped
They had asked
throwing
us
up.
about that, and we talked about it. And like she said, it was to know where we wanted to get to. She wasn't going to make it another 5, 6, whatever hour, however long it was going to be. So it was one of those moments where, knowing what we wanted, we made that choice about, even though this wasn't, again, to the book what we were going for. It was still, it was the right thing to make for us. So.
5 minutes into the IV, I came back to life. Like, smiles, I was living life. I was doing much, much better, and I felt like, okay, we can do this. I was at 6 centimeters when we got to the hospital, which I felt pretty good about. I had gone a long way. But I do think that we figured afterwards that the IV probably diluted some of the hormones in my body, and my labor did slow down quite a bit when I got to the hospital. I was at 6 centimeters when I got there, and that was probably 10 o'clock, and by 4 I was only at 8 centimeters. So I went 2 centimeters in 5 or 6 hours. So I was pretty discouraged at that point, because it was still really hard work in the hospital, and it was going a lot slower than we wanted. I was glued to the bed. I didn't get up. I kept telling myself, I know what it's like to be in labor right here. I don't know what it's like to be in labor over there. I'm going to stay right here. In hindsight, not the best decision, and we'll get to that in a minute. But they finally convinced me to get up and get in the shower. We had tried to get a room. There's only one room at Fair Oaks that has a tub, and we had tried to get that one, but it wasn't clean when we got there, so we didn't have that one. So I got in the shower, was in there for a little while. Got out of the shower, I was still at 8 centimeters, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I'm not sure I can do this anymore, which is always a good sign when you say you can't do it anymore. It usually means you're almost done. But she checked me again. I was still at 8 centimeters, and she said, my doctor said, I know that you guys are hoping for a natural birth, and I really think with that goal in mind, we might want to think about breaking your water. I know it's not what you want to do. I know it's not part of the plan, but this baby should have been here by now. You've been in labor for 15 hours. It's time to do this. And we said, as good Bradley students, can you give us a minute to talk about it? Can you leave us alone? And my mom was still there, and we talked for a couple minutes and just decided that when they talk about breaking your water early, you run the risk of really not going into full labor and, the risk of infection, and you go on the clock and all this. But at this point, I've been in labor for 12, 14, whatever, a lot of hours. And so we just decided, I'm not on the clock. We need to get this moving. We've been doing this for a long time. Let's go ahead and do it. So she broke my water. 45 minutes later, I was at 10. 5 pushes later, she was out, and we were done. So breaking my water was the best decision we made. But I was really glad we waited that long to do it, because I didn't want to, run the risk of not really getting all the way through on my own. And running into that issue with Pitocin and stuff. We were hugely blessed. The doctors and the nurses, every single nurse, every doctor that was in with us at any point during my labor had all had a natural birth themselves, which we didn't find out until after the fact. So they were all really supportive. When I got there, my nurse asked if we wanted an epidural, and we said no, and she never asked me again. At the 8-centimeter point, she leaned over to my mom and said, this is kind of her last chance to have drugs if she wants them. And my mom said, this is your last chance, but I think you're doing okay. And we said, okay, I'm fine. So they were just really respectful of the decision that we made. And we didn't pick these doctors because they were pro-natural childbirth, because like I said, when we got pregnant, we weren't even sure that's what we wanted. So it was just really encouraging to kind of have been afraid that we weren't going to get the support we wanted, and then to have such great support. So that was our first experience. Any concluding thoughts on that?
The baby came out. There was a little bit of meconium. They took her, they cleaned her up, but they brought her back, gave Bailey and Nikki about an hour together.
Yeah.
Which was really great. Before anybody else came in, it was a very sweet time, actually.
Yeah. So they did have to kind of suck her out, and so I didn't get her right away, which is a little disappointing. But I'll be honest, I was so wiped anyway that in 5 minutes when they handed it to me and she was all clean, I was like, oh, how nice. So it wasn't the end of the world. Again, something else that didn't go quite like we wanted, but ended up being fine anyway. But in hindsight, like I said, I was in the bed for 5 hours. I didn't get up. I didn't want to get up. And I regretted that in hindsight. I had wanted to do more walking around. We had the yoga ball thing, and we just didn't use it. I just had this tunnel vision of, I just want to have this baby, and I think I kind of got in my own way. So after she was born, I told Andrew, I said, I don't care if you have to drag me kicking and screaming out of the bed. I want to walk around. Like, I want to move. I want to do all the things that you're supposed to do. And so when we got pregnant with Maddie, we did a refresher course, because we are those people. We hosted a refresher course, and it was, I think, three 3-hour classes or something like that.